And for many years, empaths have tried to become the light. They forgive, endure, heal, and keep the peace. They believe that if they are good enough, understanding enough, and sacrificial enough, everything will be fine. But the price of that belief is a quiet, invisible exhaustion. We are living in an era where coldness is often celebrated, and where manipulation is sometimes called competence, and where sensitive people are treated as weak, and empaths exist in that world as those who absorb the collective emotional atmosphere. They see what others do not see and feel what others ignore, and yet many of them use that gift to protect others instead of protecting themselves. Carl Jung believed that when a part of a person is rejected for too long, and it eventually returns with greater force. And that is exactly what is beginning to happen. Empaths are no longer trying to be pure light, and they are starting to do something far more difficult. They are beginning to face their own darkness, their anger, their boundaries, and their right to say no. And this moment is not about becoming cruel. It is about becoming whole. It is not about revenge. It is about no longer allowing manipulation to shape your life. And if you feel a shift happening inside you, perhaps it is not a collapse at all. Perhaps it is the beginning of a quiet rise. And when an age built on manipulation reaches its peak, it rarely collapses with a loud explosion. It does not break apart in a dramatic moment that everyone can recognize, and instead it begins to crack quietly from the inside. On the surface, everything still looks normal. Systems continue to run. Successful faces are still praised, but deep beneath that smooth surface, the foundation has already begun to rot. Victories won through control and manipulation always carry an invisible cost, and they slowly erode trust, connection, and emotional safety. Over time, that hidden cost accumulates into a quiet tension within society. For years, and many cultures have unconsciously celebrated the type of person who can control narratives, influence emotions, and exploit weakness while hiding their own vulnerability. And these are the people who speak little about values, but excel at strategy. They enter a room and quickly assess who can be useful and who can be ignored, and society often labels this behavior as strength, realism, or knowing how to play the game. But Jung warned about something important, and when an inner situation is not made conscious, it appears outside as fate. When people refuse to face their own fears, insecurities, and need for recognition, and those emotions do not disappear. They simply emerge in different forms. Instead of understanding themselves, people begin trying to control others, and this is not real strength. It is a form of defense polished until it looks impressive. When entire societies begin operating through this defense, and manipulation slowly becomes normalized, people adapt to environments where authenticity is replaced by strategy and connection is replaced by advantage. And I once had a friend named David. From the outside, he was exactly the type of person modern society admires. He was sharp, strategic, and emotionally controlled. And at work, he rose quickly because he understood how to influence people, and he knew how to make others feel dependent on him, and then withdraw at the right moment to maintain power. He described this skill as keeping the upper hand. But one evening after a crowded gathering, when most people had left and the room had grown quiet, he said something that revealed a deeper truth, and he admitted that he no longer knew who genuinely cared about him and who remained close simply because it benefited them. For a moment, the confident mask slipped, and the same control that protected him from being hurt had slowly isolated him. When someone builds their life around manipulation, and they must constantly watch for manipulation in return, suspicion becomes normal, trust becomes rare. This is the hidden price few people openly discuss. And Jung described this pattern through the idea of the shadow, not only within individuals but within entire societies. When a culture praises one extreme quality, and its opposite is pushed into the unconscious. But what is pushed down does not vanish. It gathers energy, like a pendulum pulled too far to one side, and eventually the pendulum must swing back. The age of manipulation represents a pendulum pulled toward control, image, and surface success. It can produce fast achievements, but it also generates widespread burnout, broken relationships, loneliness, and anxiety. Rising levels of depression and emotional exhaustion are not random events, and they are signals that something deeper is out of balance. Imagine a tall building that appears strong from the outside, while the internal steel structure slowly rusts, and from a distance everything seems impressive. People admire the height and design, But small vibrations begin to reveal instability, and a system built only on image and control lacks the stability that comes from honest inner awareness. When individuals refuse to examine their real motives, and they begin acting unconsciously, and the unconscious never stays silent. According to Jung, it constantly seeks expression. If it cannot emerge through awareness, and it eventually appears through crisis. Today we can see signs of this shift in everyday life. Many people no longer trust perfectly polished personalities, and they question leaders who appear flawless. They grow tired of relationships built entirely on convenience or benefit, and the admiration for emotional coldness is slowly fading. Something subtle is changing. People are beginning to search for authenticity, and they want to feel seen rather than used. They want genuine connection rather than strategic interaction. This transformation does not happen instantly. In fact, and systems under threat often intensify their controlling behavior at first. But the more manipulation reveals itself, the easier it becomes to recognize, and once manipulation becomes visible, it begins losing its influence. Psychological development always moves through periods of tension and crisis, and the old structure cannot disappear quietly. It must first be exposed. Only then can something new begin to form. The peak of manipulation is not only a sign of decline, and it is also a signal that a different foundation is preparing to emerge. When control becomes extreme, the human need for honesty and freedom grows stronger, and this same principle also exists within individuals. Many empaths have spent believing that their sensitivity was a weakness, and they learned to absorb other people's emotions, smooth conflicts, and maintain harmony at any cost, and they became experts at sensing what others felt before it was even spoken. But emotional sensitivity is not the same as fragility, and in many cases it is a form of highly refined perception. When two personalities meet, subtle emotional signals are constantly exchanged. Tone of voice, posture, and eye contact, pauses in speech, all of these communicate far more than words alone. Empaths are simply more attuned to these signals, and they notice hesitation in someone's voice. They sense tension hidden beneath polite words. They feel emotional shifts in a room before others consciously recognize them, and yet in environments that value toughness above awareness, this sensitivity is often misunderstood. When empaths react strongly to dishonesty or emotional tension, and they may be told they are overthinking or being too sensitive. In reality, they are often detecting what others have learned to ignore, and emotional intelligence is not about feeling everything intensely. It is about recognizing emotional patterns accurately. Empaths often function like emotional seismographs, and just as a seismograph detects small tremors deep within the earth before an earthquake occurs, empaths detect subtle emotional movements before conflicts become visible. And this ability does not create problems. It reveals them early. The difficulty rises when empaths believe their role is to fix every emotional disturbance they detect, and seeing pain naturally creates the impulse to heal it. But emotional awareness does not require emotional responsibility for everyone around you, and recognizing another person's feelings does not mean carrying them. One of the most important distinctions for empaths is the difference between sensitivity and boundaries. And sensitivity allows you to feel. Boundaries determine how much you allow those feelings to influence your choices. Without boundaries, sensitivity becomes exhausting, and with boundaries, sensitivity becomes wisdom. Many empaths eventually reach a psychological turning point. After years of endurance and accommodation, and something inside begins to shift. The constant effort to maintain harmony becomes unsustainable. The inner self begins demanding balance, and Jung described this turning point with a concept called enantiodromia. It refers to the moment when an extreme position naturally produces its opposite, and when someone spends years suppressing anger, anger does not disappear. It accumulates in the unconscious. When someone constantly sacrifices their needs, and the neglected part of the psyche eventually demands recognition. This reversal is not a failure of character. It is the psyche attempting to restore balance, and, at first the shift may feel confusing. Someone who has always been patient may suddenly feel irritation more strongly, and someone who always said yes may feel an unfamiliar desire to refuse. This does not mean the person is becoming cold or selfish, and it means previously rejected parts of the personality are returning. If this reversal is ignored for too long, it may erupt suddenly as anger or emotional withdrawal, but if it is recognized early, it can develop into a mature form of self-assertion. Instead of exploding, the empath begins setting boundaries. And instead of enduring everything silently, they learn to speak calmly but clearly. This process often feels quiet rather than dramatic. It may appear as small choices, and declining an unreasonable request, stepping back from draining relationships, or refusing to accept disrespect disguised as humor. And these actions may look minor from the outside, but internally they represent a profound shift. For empaths, integrating their shadow becomes the next stage of growth, and the shadow includes qualities that were rejected earlier in life. For many empaths, this includes anger, self-protection, and the ability to confront others, and these traits were often labeled negative or selfish. As a result, they were pushed into the unconscious. But true psychological maturity requires acknowledging them. Anger, and when understood correctly, is not destructive. It is a signal that a boundary has been crossed. When anger is recognized and expressed responsibly, and it becomes a protective force. Integrating the shadow does not turn a compassionate person into a predator. It simply restores balance between openness and protection. And an empath who understands their shadow no longer feels obligated to accept everything. They can remain kind while still protecting their limits, and they can listen deeply without sacrificing their own well-being. This integration transforms how others respond to them as well, and manipulative individuals rely on unclear boundaries. When boundaries become visible, exploitation becomes much harder, and the empath does not need to argue constantly or prove their worth. Often the most powerful response is simply refusing to participate in unhealthy dynamics, and this quiet shift leads to what might be called the greatest comeback. But it is not a comeback built on revenge or dominance. It is a return to wholeness. And for someone who has spent years shrinking themselves to maintain peace, becoming whole can feel like rediscovering lost parts of their identity. Sensitivity remains, but it is now supported by clarity and self-respect. Relationships begin to change naturally. Connections based on exploitation fade away, and relationships built on mutual respect become stronger. The empath no longer seeks approval at any cost, and they choose relationships that align with their values rather than those that merely demand their patience. Interestingly, when this inner balance forms, empaths often become softer rather than harder. Because they are no longer drained by constant emotional labor, they can offer compassion more freely, and they help because they want to, not because they feel obligated. They stay where there is genuine connection and leave where there is only manipulation. And this quiet transformation rarely attracts applause. It often happens through small decisions repeated consistently over time. And the greatest comeback is not proving others wrong. It is no longer living as a smaller version of yourself. It is choosing truth over approval, boundaries over exhaustion, and an authenticity over constant adjustment. In that choice, something remarkable begins to happen, and the empath stops being a victim of emotional environments and becomes a stable center within them. Gentle but firm, compassionate but self-respecting, sensitive but no longer easily exploited. And in a world that once dismissed sensitivity as weakness, standing firmly in that balance becomes one of the most powerful transformations a person can experience.